Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining Lead for another Let's Talk series. Today's Let's Talk series will be titled Through the Fire. We have a very special guest joining us today. This is a lunchtime event, so please feel free to fill yourself up as much as you can. I am not responsible for anybody who falls asleep at their desk immediately following this. We are broadcasting live, so for those of you online, thank you for joining us. Those of you here, thank you for taking the time out of your day to come spend a little time with us. We're talking about Through the Fire. This is going to highlight an area in Tulsa that was known as Black Wallstree that went through some tumultuous things. We have an individual here who's kind of an expert in that area, and we're going to kind of take a look at the effect of the Tulsa massacre, the effect on African Americans and the economy during those times, and how that over the years how the landscape of that over the years has changed, and some of the things that different cities and different organizations are doing to change what that looks like in today's age. And Mr. Dale Hogg is going to go ahead and give us some insight into that. If I can, I'll take a moment just to read a little bit from his bio so that you guys can know who's talking to you. So Mr. Dale Hogg is a native of Tulsa, Oklahoma, an influential figure in business, education, and civil rights advocacy. Raised in a city where he would be assisting in shaping Mr. Hogg's journey, began at Booker T. Washington High School and then on to Colorado State. Culminated at the University of Tulsa, where he notably became the first black member of the Board of Trustees. From there, Mr. Hogg's career took off to North American Aviation, a major Tulsa employer, where he initially served as a research analyst in the chemistry lab. However, he kind of found his calling in the human resources sector, where he excelled in interviewing, recruiting, performance evaluation, and affirmative action. In those roles at various organizations, including as the executive director at the Urban League of Tulsa and the corporate manager of public relations for the Williams Company, Mr. Hogg became an active community resource, serving on boards, hosting key visitors, and advocating for equal opportunities. His leadership in Tulsa's Equal Opportunity Program, sponsored by key local businesses, was instrumental in advancing diversity and inclusion. Recognized for his achievements, Mr. Hogg was inducted into the Booker T. Washington Hall of Fame for Achievement in Business in 2017 and the Tulsa Public Schools Athletic Hall of Fame in 2021. His accomplishments extend way beyond business, with a significant impact on education and media. He pioneered efforts to transform George Washington Carver and Booker T. Washington into successful magnet schools and made history as the first black news anchor in Tulsa, broadcasting on KO-TV, a CBS News affiliate. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Dale Hogg.
Thank you, kind sir. Good afternoon. Thank you for the response. As I came in, I noted this is a beautiful campus. You're very fortunate to be here and to have such a wonderful environment in which to, quote unquote, work. HVAC, as I have found from Ms. Holland this morning, is big business. And Lennox certainly has made its mark over the years as an outstanding provider. And so it's very good this afternoon, and indeed a pleasure to be with you, to see this corporate office of Lennox International, plus the opportunity to meet more of the multiples of talents that are actually here. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I had the distinct pleasure of meeting two of your impressive employees, Ms. Teresa Holland, who is sitting in the back, and of course Douglas Smiley. Both of them have certainly exhibited a professionalism and incredible representation of what exists here at Lennox International. So I appreciate both of them for guiding me as they have. My very thanks to them for this invitation to speak with you this afternoon. I say speak with you because I do understand that later we will have a Q&A session, and I certainly welcome that, and will be happy to share anything that I possibly can with you. I will say to those of you sitting here in the room and those who have the opportunity to have this presentation streamed on their behalf, it really is refreshing to see that Linux leadership has endorsed programs such as the one today. I see too, from the guidance that I have received from the Linux employees, that there is a welcome to hear about history. For indeed, we should know that the past is prologue. I believe in order to improve and to continue moving forward, we must know what has previously occurred. And in doing that, communication is crucial. The world's growth and its expanded improvements all depend on knowledge of past experiences. We do learn from them. With that, I would be negligent if I failed to mention that we're but a few days away from Juneteenth, the national holiday that recognizes the freeing of slaves. The holiday's origin story begins right here in Texas, Galveston, as a matter of fact, which was the westernmost area of the Union in 1865, when enslaved people there were told of their emancipation on June 19th, 1865. They had technically already been freed 2.5 years prior to that, when President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1 of 1863. The slaveholders, however, in Texas, had kept that information to themselves, extending the period of violent exploitation of enslaved African Americans. The following year, in 1886, a celebration was had in Texas, the very first Juneteenth observance to recognize freedom from slavery in the United States. It should also be remembered that Ms. Opal Lee, a native Texan, retired teacher, counselor, and activist, has played an extremely important and significant role in the movement to make Juneteenth a federally recognized holiday. She is often described as the grandmother of Juneteenth. And as you probably know, or most of you know, she resides here in Dallas. Just 2 years ago, only 2 years ago, on June 17th of 2021, President Joe Biden signed Senate Bill 475, making Juneteenth the 11th observed federal holiday. Ms. Holland and Mr. Smiley have provided me with the guidance and the direction to share with you some of my life experiences, particularly as it pertains to the Tulsa Race Massacre. Some of you may be aware of this horrific event that occurred 102 years ago. But America, the world for that matter, was uninformed until just 2 years ago. But hold the phone. 52 years ago, 52 years prior, a magazine with the title Impact was published with interviews, photographs, and details about the now known Tulsa Race Massacre. Let me digress just for a few moments and allow for the stage to be set.
To fully understand the impact that Dale made on Tulsa journalism is you have to go back, and the best illustration I can make of that is when I was an intern with the Tulsa Tribune, had to be the mid-60s, and somewhere along the line someone had mentioned to me Tulsa's race riots, and I grew up in Tulsa. I took Oklahoma history, which was a required course in the 8th grade. Tulsa's race riots, what's that? And I went to the city editor and I said, have we ever done anything on Tulsa's race riots? We don't talk about that. No, no.
The white community went into a conspiracy of silence. You wasn't allowed to talk about the riot.
Tulsa's race riots of 1921 were not talked about in impolite or polite company, period.
It was not talked about, it was not read about.
It was a blank page in Tulsa's history.
Don came to me with a thought. He said, we're in the Urban League. We should have even more impact on the community.
Dale and I and a couple others developed Impact Magazine.
Well, we came up with the idea of telling the community and the state of Oklahoma about that race riot. And we did it through this magazine called Impact.
Dale's contribution, he commissioned a local writer to do the first story in Tulsa journalism that had been done on the Tulsa race riots since the Tulsa race riots.
We put together this magazine and dedicated that issue to the race riot.
And as a result, the first time that the race riot was really publicly noted was in that magazine.
We printed the story of the riot in Impact Magazine that became an instant bestseller.
We felt a necessity to let, first of all, the black community of Tulsa know what has happened in the past, what we have had to deal with in terms of potentially rebuilding.
And to that point, nobody knew about the Tulsa race riot. I'd only heard about it when I was 16. Nobody would talk about it.
Suddenly, it could be talked about.
It was a long, hard history.
Even today, you cannot see a documentary about the race riot that doesn't quote Impact Magazine.
One can be saddened even talking about it, but at the same time, to be enlightened brings hope for now and the future.
I think that story in Impact Magazine ultimately led to the call for reparations and the Reconciliation Park and all the things surrounding the riot that's happening in this town as we see it today.
And without Dale's pace-setting, trailblazing journalism in that instance, who knows where we'd be in regard to that.
Thank you, Henry. I regret the video was not as clear as I would like for it to have been, but I will continue by letting you know, as was mentioned by Doug, I was born and raised in Tulsa, attended George Washington Carver Middle School and Booker T. Washington High School, which at the time were all black schools. But never did I hear of the devastation suffered by the Tulsa black community in 1921. But that was not uncommon. As you heard in this opening clip, the entire city of Tulsa had placed a hush on the subject. No media, no organization, no family discussions. It was a forbidden topic. But be that as it may, Tulsa, Oklahoma was named the oil capital of the world, even being declared by the publication Reader's Digest as America's most beautiful city. The hidden significant piece of history was not brought to light until the commemorative issue of Impact magazine. Incidentally, I brought a copy of that magazine with me today. The Impact magazine was published in June of 1971, 50 years after the occurrence of that horrific event. I'm very proud to announce that Impact was brought to the attention of the Smithsonian's African American Museum in Washington, D.C. And thanks to my son, Keenan, who pushed the effort, and as president and editor of the magazine, I donated my original copy. I donated my original publication this past year, and it was accepted by the museum to be utilized in its Tulsa exhibit. Well, it goes back to 1969. Some of you, I can see, were not even born at that point. When I became director of the Urban League of Tulsa, that I learned of Tulsa's other history. In fact, in preparation for submitting a document to the National Urban League, requesting funds to again apply to the community, I found through research the mention of a prosperous and vibrant area in the Black community, but it never referenced the deterioration and downfall that occurred in that area. Further probing and personal interviews, however, revealed events that we just did not know. One of my direct reports, whom you saw in the video, Don Ross, who later became a state representative, had a deeper interest in finding out more. And over a period of a year, he and I discussed many of the findings, including a personal interview with a gentleman by the name of W.D. Williams, a Booker T. Washington teacher and a survivor of the race massacre, who as a teenager actually experienced the horror. Perhaps some of you are aware that the early 1900s flourished for North Tulsa. The Black community, due to its geographic position, immediately to the north was the Osage Indians, who at this time were some of the wealthiest people in the world per capita. That, of course, is another story, a story of which you should be aware. In fact, you may wish to note there's a publication, Killers of the Yellow Moon, of which I read and would welcome your doing so. Just west of downtown Tulsa, in the Black community, the oil refineries and the pumps, they were steadily producing and attracting major oil companies to Tulsa, as it did become, as I mentioned, the oil capital of the world. Consequently, the Black community received the residuals from this oil-rich area, and smartly, much of that generated wealth remained in the Black community, and it thrived like no other. It became known as the Negro Wall Street. It later morphed into Black Wall Street. Business development, newspaper publishing, pharmacies, theaters, restaurants, barber and beauty shops, service stations, churches, doctors' offices, general stores, it was a very popular Greenwood Avenue. Greenwood stretched approximately 3 miles on the north side, and the Greenwood district totaled approximately 35 square blocks. It was anchored on the south by the street Archer. Now, Archer separated the black community literally from downtown Tulsa. And to the north, there was Pine Street. Greenwood was the main thoroughfare. Drove it many a day. Aligned with these mentioned businesses there on Greenwood. Then there were homes to the east and to the west, as well as further north. Incidentally, I'll toss in a little tidbit of trivia. Many of you, I am sure, have heard of the Gap Band. The Gap Band and Charlie Wilson. Oh yeah, we've all patted our feet to that. The Wilson family are longtime Tulsans. I've known them. I had a couple of them in my class. But each of them had this incredible musical talent, and it is now recognized worldwide. But the trivia of the matter is, in honor of the area of Greenwood, the event and the determination of its residences, they named themselves Gap. Greenwood, Archer, and Pine. Well, it was May 31, 1921. In the evening when things went sour for Tulsa, a young black man by the name of Dick Rowland had been accused of molesting a white female elevator operator in downtown Tulsa. Now, mind you, here was a young man who worked at a Shine parlor, who went to the bathroom in the only facility of which blacks were able to utilize in downtown Tulsa, and had to catch an elevator to do so. But at any rate, he was arrested and held at the Tulsa County Courthouse. Once he was arrested and the news got out as to its accusation, there were white crowds that were armed and began to arrive at the clubhouse, demanding the release of Dick Rowland, demanding the release for a lynching ceremony. Well, rumors of that gathering made it to the black community, and a march to the courthouse began with a number of armed black men. One deputy sheriff, Barney Cleaver, happened to be the individual who confronted the black crowd on the west side of the courthouse. He told them that, look, guys, Rowland is secure here at the courthouse. You may as well go home. Nothing's going to happen here. Well, they started to disperse. But despite the assurances of this man, Cleaver, it became apparent to them that whites were still gathered and their mood was growing increasingly out of control. And as more cars began to arrive on both sides, armed individuals, tensions rising, tensions continuing to the boiling point until a shot, one shot, rang out. Well, by midnight on that same day, an estimated 45 cars with armed white citizens patrolled the streets. And by June 1st, 1921, Blacks had been driven back to the Greenwood district, and according to interviews, blacks held their ground until ammunition ran low. But more importantly, for the first time in history, here in the United States, a bombing by planes occurred on Greenwood. Kerosene bombs were dropped on the buildings by private planes, and it was then that whites moved in with force, killing, burning, and looting, including residential areas. From the many owned businesses by blacks, inventory was taken and safes taken to the streets. Personal items of jewelry, clothes, and cash from residences, with buildings and homes left to smolder in the ashes. And for the next 2 days, having called in the National Guard, they struggled to gain control, and a roundup of individuals occurred. Hundreds being led to the Tulsa State Fairgrounds, which was used as an internment camp. An excess of 1,200 businesses and homes had been destroyed. Hundreds died, and many fled the city, never to return. And making bad matters worse, insurance companies refused claims made to assist in recovery. Now, by Saturday, the 4th of June, the city had grown quiet. The fury of the massacre had spent itself, and even the ever-multiplying rumors began to die away. The local officials took over, and for the next few weeks, blacks found themselves denied the sale of any possession of firearms or weapons of any kind, and just as importantly, forced to have municipal edict to have identification tags on their person when they were found on the streets. If they were employed, they were ordered to wear green job tags, countersigned by their employers, and their moves were highly restricted. But for the next 25 years, there was a slow rebuilding process that occurred. The area regained some of its popularity, some businesses springing up. And it was at that point that I literally witnessed that growth during my early years, and I took advantage of all it had to offer. The new Rex Theater, the Dreamland Theater on Greenwood, Pearson's Chili Parlor, Holman's Jewelry Store, Cannon's General Store. Our residence of my family was only blocks away from Greenwood, so we spent many of our weekends walking the street of Greenwood, people watching, and having that rare treat of an ice cream cone. Business was not the same, however. Sustainability was no longer possible, since many supporters had indeed abandoned the city. As years passed, other circumstances too had its negative effects on the North Side community. Urban renewal, highway construction that literally split the infamous Greenwood, and a reluctance of crucial facilities, such as grocery stores and other significant needs, to build or locate on the North Side did not occur. So slowly, the anticipated revival of Greenwood faded. But the community The community is one of resilience, unbelievably so. And the push for equitability, it never left Tulsa. Support for remaining symbols stayed very strong, particularly for its surviving educational basis. And as you heard Doug in its introductory remarks of myself, Carver Middle School and Booker T. Washington High School stood fast. And even today, it's remarkable that Booker T. Washington is among the best high schools in the country. I am personally aware that 2 presidential visits have been made to Booker T. Washington and its growth and what it now has to offer. Well, a major push has continued to occur on behalf of the survivors of the race riot and their descendants. In fact, in 2008, led by a combination of high-powered legal entities, including Johnnie Cochran, this case went all the way to the Supreme Court for reparations. But the Supreme Court turned it down. For those who may be interested, there is an excellent documentary called Before They Die. I have a copy of that, and you could as well. It represents that effort and literally features some of the descendants from the race riot. It is available, of course, on Amazon. Amazon has everything, don't they? The struggle continues through the efforts of a good friend of mine and state representative, Regina Goodwin. The Goodwin family has a long history, including individuals who were indeed in the race riot. Regina, who has not minced words about the impact of the massacre, has been featured in a most powerful video testifying before Congress in May of 2021. Another acquaintance of mine, Attorney Demario Solomon Simmons, is currently representing, and you may have seen it on the TV most recently, representing a couple of survivors, the sister-brother combination of the Fletchers, 107 years old and 102 years old, respectfully. You wouldn't believe it if you see them. They both look so much younger. And while this reparation struggle continues even today, the community's effort, and I'm proud to say, to establish remembrance and promote solidarity in Tulsa has fortunately increased in the last few years. For instance, collaborative efforts have developed an outstanding facility called Greenwood Rising. Maybe even something this group may consider visiting. The establishment of Greenwood Rising is merely a Black Wall Street History Center. It is now a nationally recognized private nonprofit organization, highly regarded as one of the most dynamic displays and depictions of Tulsa history. Tours are available. The establishment of John Hope Franklin Park. This has prompted a national symposium, which is now in its 14th year. It is designed to connect, to learn, and to grow. Its theme this year is History of Hope, Building Greenwood. It was held in Tulsa just this past month. In the spirit of John Hope Franklin, the center promotes reconciliation, and it generates truth through scholarly work and constructive community engagement. And for those who are not familiar with this gentleman, John Hope Franklin, let me mention that he too was a Tulsan. Graduated from Booker T. Washington High School, attended Fisk University, and finished at Harvard in 1941. As an outstanding historian and author, he became best known for his publication, From Slavery to Freedom. He too became known for many of his memorable quotes. And most appropriate, and one of my favorites, is, I quote, "If the house is to be set in order, one cannot begin with the present. He must begin with the past." Now, additionally, each year there is a Black Wall Street Legacy Festival featuring a series of free events and programs during the month of May, which has just been completed. It commemorates the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. It too intends to spread the truth, inspire hope, and extend tradition. Now, without a doubt, the depth of this subject is extensive, and what I have shared with you today merely scratches the surface. So in bringing this portion to a close, allow me to leave you with this. These mentioned activities for enhancement in Tulsa are but a few of the many efforts being taken to build a better Tulsa. I lived in Tulsa most of my life, and I was afforded tremendous opportunities. I made an effort to make a difference while I was there, but I know there is so much more to be done, not only in Tulsa, but throughout this incredible country of ours. The divisiveness often promoted, the efforts to thwart simple rights for all citizens, such as voting, has no place in our society. Yes, it is true that we have many, many challenges before us. So many who promote hate, violence, and frankly, fear. Too many have the desire for moving back rather than moving forward. The fact is, we as a country have changed. We have changed. We are a melting pot. Look at this room. A melting pot of multiples. Multiples with more talent, more intelligence than anywhere in the world. Our cities, our state, our country is conquering. We can conquer anything. We are so capable. We can conquer anything. But it takes all of us. It takes all of us working together, harnessing this powerful entity, one where respect and relationships, they count, and the opportunity for all its citizens should exist. By working together, showing love and care for one another, we can make a difference. In fact, it was JFK who said, one person can make a difference, and everyone should try. I want to thank each of you for your attentiveness, and the Lennox organization particularly for providing the space to venture into the past, to see where we have been in order to know where we should go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dale. I will never listen to a Gap Band song in the same manner. I had no idea about the GAP thing, and so in terms of a song that the Gap Band wrote, I would just like to say that was outstanding. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
At this time, thank you all for your attention. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking a little time out of your day to take a trip in the past. We will have a short Q&A session, so if anyone has any questions, raise your hand and I'll sprint as fast as I can to get to you. I'll start it off with a question.
Sure.
Financial literacy in the African American community has typically been low. Do you know of anything or any programs or things that you've seen other communities do to help increase and raise just the financial literacy among African Americans in particular?
Yes, I think that, having been over the years in so many different environments, working in a corporate environment, as I have, I like the idea, first of all, that for those who are financially capable, corporations such as Lennox, the many corporations of which I have worked, I have seen, and I'm very encouraged by the contributions that are made by those corporate entities. Now, as I say that, frankly, I expect more. There is much more to be done. And when I look at the bottom line of corporations, there's an awful lot of money that is made. In fact, just to take an additional moment, when I see individuals, and you see them, they're on TV about the billions of which they have earned and made. What are they going to do with billions? You can't take it with you. How about contributing it to the worthiness of the country, of the individuals who are in need? I am one who simply thinks that to see a homeless person on the street in the United States of America, it makes no sense to me.
Thank you for that. Any questions?
Before I ask my question, I want to tell you that Credit Union of Texas is opening up branches in high schools, but they're not in predominantly African American high schools, but they're starting. So maybe reach out to them about that. Mr. Hodge, I know from my daughter's paternal great-grandmother that she got really, really emotional when I was asking her about the experience of the Tulsa Race Massacre. It happened on her birthday, and she was speaking of all of her birthday gifts going up in flames, and I can tell she was just so emotional, and she was 80 at the time that I was asking her about it. And I could say that even though it was legislative that they shouldn't talk about it, I would think some of it was so traumatic that they couldn't go back there. But did you find that to be the case? You said you were born and raised in Tulsa. Did you find that to be the case within your own family?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, and I think it is exactly what prevailed. Individuals did not want to talk about it. It was that traumatic for them. They still could not accept the fact of seeing someone leave their homes with their personal belongings, their jewelry, their cash, their clothes. In fact, there was one individual who, I can't remember, it was the grandmother, I think, of Regina Goodwin, the state representative, who said, as one of her relatives literally witnessed this coat that had been given to her mother or his mother, and saw this individual walking out of the house after it had been looted with that coat over the arm. I don't know what type of coat, but obviously it was very special just to talk about that. So yes, you're very right. It was tough to talk about. The interviews, for instance, that we had with the Impact magazine was with W.D. Williams that I mentioned in the presentation. It was so touching to me. I honestly sometimes get emotional in going back and reading it to see that he, as a teenager, and his father took off running, and his father went in one direction, he went into a different direction, and as a teenager ran right into the white mob that was looting. We asked him the question, well gosh, you're still here. He said, only through the grace of God, there was a white gentleman who knew his family, and he thought for sure that he was going to be shot and killed, but that individual took him into his home. So you could see, that all people are just people. It doesn't matter, black, white, whatever. It matters not, but we're all human beings. We all have to think in terms, just as I mentioned, working together, living together, doing things for one another, lifting each other up when they're down.
Thank you. We'll take two more and then we'll wrap it up.
So, Dr. Hogg, thank you for a really good overview of the Tulsa race riots and massacre. Quick question. So you see communities all over the country that are going back in time and trying to right wrongs that were occurring to African American families, landowners of that similar period. You see towns all over the country or cities all over the country trying to reverse those things. And although I think the federal government denied reparations for any of those wrongs, what is the city of Tulsa doing locally to right some of those wrongs?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question as well. And of course, not being in Tulsa, I probably can't do it justice. However, I do know that the leadership in Tulsa has gotten so much more involved. First of all, getting the approval and starting to reach back to determine exactly what has happened, how many really did die. As a matter of fact, you probably have seen some of the news reports where the city authorized the excavation at some of the cemeteries where supposedly there were mass graves where bodies had been dumped. That was indeed a start from the city of Tulsa's standpoint. Now the key to me is the fact that it was finally recognized. And that was only a few years ago that the city of Tulsa stepped up to the plate and said, yeah, it happened, and what are we going to do about it? So the what are we going to do about it is still occurring. But I also know that the leadership has expanded tremendously. There's a tremendous involvement of Tulsans, both black and white, to right many of these wrongs. The reparation part of it, frankly, I do not understand. I do not understand the fight that has occurred has been so solid in terms of evidence, and nothing has happened. There hasn't been a dollar that has been given back to any of the individuals who suffered or their descendants. There was some legislation several years ago that came forth and actually recommended reparation for individuals. So much of it was gutted, like you see so many other pieces of legislation, that it never happened. But I do know that those representatives, such as Regina Goodwin and others, are really continuing that struggle and that fight to make it happen.
Last one.
Ms. Hart, thank you once again for sharing with us this afternoon. Question, with the push in the culture now for diversity, in your opinion, do you think that causes a tension between trying to create ethnic centers of excellence? Can we get back to something like Black Wall Street, and do we need to, in your opinion?
I think that's a very good question, because in my opinion, we will never see another Black Wall Street. And I don't think it's necessary that we do. Because, as I mentioned, we're a changing world. We're changing anywhere you look. And I emphasize the necessity to think in terms of the total. It is not an individuality of any particular race. It is not an individuality of anything. And that's why I get, frankly, disturbed when I see so much emphasis placed on the individuals who have made mountains and mountains of monies over the years. I'm saying to myself, gosh, what if I were a billionaire? I've had those dreams and thoughts, of course, but I know, because of my own personal feelings and because of the fact that I have been in the human business for a long time, how many people could I help? How many situations could I create to help others? To me, that's the mindset, that we have to have. And that's not saying that you give up anything that you have. We all want to succeed. We all want to have. And historically, and now, if you look a few years ago versus where you are now, what more do you have than you did then? Much more. I do, and I know that you do as well. And you're continuing to strive to do that. But it takes, in my opinion, and I will say it over and over again, I preach it wherever I go, we really are one. We are one. And one, we have to look after one another.
Fantastic. Dale Hogg, thank you very much for that. Lennox, thank you guys
you.
for hanging out with us for a little while. Another Let's Talk
Thank
series.
you so much.
We'll see you guys later. Enjoy the rest of your day.